Hey guys, tonight we're not just going to drift off to sleep. We're going on an epic, sometimes unsettling, journey back in time. Imagine yourself, if you will, not tucked snugly in bed, but instead, feeling the coarse sand of ancient trade routes beneath your bare feet, the sun beating down on your neck, and the distant, exotic scent of something truly precious wafting on the wind. You're navigating bustling marketplaces filled with unknown languages, dodging camel trains laden with mysterious goods, and constantly aware that a wrong turn, a misspoken word, or a simple twist of fate could mean you're never seeing home again. It's a world where the seemingly mundane objects we find in our kitchen cabinets today were once worth more than gold, objects that launched empires, fueled wars, and literally changed the map of the world. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes out there, let's be honest. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our adventure begins with a spice so common now, it's practically invisible in your pantry, cinnamon. But centuries ago, this fragrant bark wasn't just a dash in your apple pie. It was a symbol of immense wealth, power, and even divinity. You see, the ancient Egyptians, those masters of grand monuments and elaborate rituals, were utterly obsessed with it. They didn't just use it for flavor, they embalmed their pharaohs with it, believing its aromatic properties would preserve the body for the afterlife. Imagine the scene: priests carefully wrapping mummies, the air thick with the sweet, spicy scent of cinnamon, a scent that promised eternity. This wasn't some cheap trick, it was a costly, highly prized ingredient, often more valuable than gold itself. Its scarcity fueled its myth, making it a truly sought-after commodity. Now, how did this exotic bark from distant lands make its way to the Nile? This is where the story gets really interesting. For a long time, the origins of cinnamon were shrouded in mystery, deliberately so by the Arab traders who controlled its supply. They spun wild tales to protect their monopoly, stories of the spice growing in remote, dangerous lands, guarded by terrifying creatures like enormous birds that built their nests from cinnamon sticks on unreachable cliffs. You'd have to lure the birds away with large pieces of meat, they claimed, causing the nests to fall, allowing you to snatch the precious spice. Seriously, imagine trying to explain that to your boss back in Rome. Yeah, so, we need more meat, specifically for dropping from the sky to collect bark. It's almost too absurd to believe, right? But people did believe it, adding to the allure and the price of this mythical spice. This clever bit of marketing, woven into the fabric of daily life, kept the trade routes secret and the profits flowing. These early traders were the original spin doctors, crafting narratives that made their goods seem even more desirable and harder to obtain. The truth, of course, was far less dramatic but equally fascinating. Cinnamon originated primarily in what is now Sri Lanka, a beautiful island then known as Ceylon. But getting it from Ceylon to Egypt involved a massive, complex network of traders traversing vast distances across land and sea. This was the nascent stage of what would become the legendary spice routes, a sprawling network of pathways connecting east and west. Historians still argue whether the initial discovery of cinnamon's properties was accidental or the result of deliberate experimentation by ancient civilizations. Was it a chance encounter with the bark or a meticulous search for aromatic plants? The answer might forever be lost to the shifting sands of time. You can almost feel the sun on your skin, the grit between your toes, as you envision those early caravans, laden with this precious bark. It wasn't just a simple exchange of goods. It was a transfer of cultures, ideas, and knowledge, all facilitated by something as simple yet profound as a tree's bark. Think about it. A piece of a tree from a distant land could determine the fate of a pharaoh's eternal journey, adorn the altars of temples, or simply make a dish taste extraordinary for the wealthy elite. It was a status symbol, a medicine, a preservative, and a spiritual aid, all rolled into one fragrant package. And as we continue our journey, you'll see how other forgotten spices held equally captivating, and sometimes terrifying, stories of their own. As those precious cinnamon caravans snaked across the ancient world, they weren't traveling alone. Imagine the camel trains, not just piled high with aromatic bark, but also with other, perhaps less glamorous, but equally significant goods. These were the Silk Road's hidden gems, the unsung heroes of early trade that truly shaped the flow of goods, ideas, and even diseases between East and West. While silk itself was the star, hence the name, a whole constellation of forgotten spices traveled alongside it, quietly weaving their way into the fabric of distant cultures and economies. You might be surprised to learn what else was considered a luxury, a necessity, or even a magical cure in those days. Think of it. You're trudging alongside a caravan, dust in your teeth, and among the bales of silk and the bundles of cinnamon, you catch the faint, musky scent of something else. Perhaps it's galbanum, a pungent resin from a giant fennel-like plant. We rarely hear about it today, but for the Romans and Greeks, it was a highly valued medicine and incense. They burned it in temples to cleanse the air and ward off evil spirits, and physicians prescribed it for everything from digestive issues to menstrual cramps. It wasn't exactly a party trick, given its strong, slightly bitter aroma, but it was incredibly important for its perceived therapeutic properties. You can almost see a Roman senator, perhaps with a slight headache after a particularly fiery debate, reaching for a little galbanum to clear his mind. Or consider costus root, another ancient marvel. This wasn't something you'd sprinkle on your dinner, but it was vital in perfumery and traditional medicine. Its earthy, somewhat animalic scent was prized for fixing more volatile aromas in perfumes, making them last longer. Imagine the aristocratic women of Rome or the elegant ladies of Byzantium, their clothes infused with complex perfumes, many of which owed their longevity to a little costus root from the Himalayas. It's funny how something so foundational to ancient luxury became so utterly obscure today. Historians still argue whether the primary driver for transporting some of these lesser-known substances was purely medicinal or if their aromatic qualities for perfumes and incenses were equally, if not more, important. Was it healing or hedonism that truly spurred their trade? These aren't the headline-grabbing spices like pepper or cloves, but their cumulative impact was immense. They weren't just commodities, they were vectors for cultural exchange. When a merchant from Persia brought asafoetida, yes, that intensely pungent, almost sulfurous resin, to India, it didn't just become an ingredient. It influenced culinary traditions and Ayurvedic medicine. If you've ever smelled asafoetida, you know it's a bold statement. Imagine a chef in ancient India experimenting with this new, potent flavor, figuring out how to temper its raw power into something delicious, giving rise to new dishes and flavor profiles that still exist today. Just a pinch, they'd say, or you'll clear the entire village. It's the kind of ingredient that truly shapes a cuisine, for better or worse, depending on your nose. And let's not forget the dyes. While not strictly spices, plant-based dyes like indigo and madder root often traveled along the same routes, sometimes mixed in with spice shipments. Indigo, originating from India, produced that rich, deep blue that was highly coveted by royalty and the wealthy throughout the ancient world. The vibrant textiles created with these dyes were just as much a testament to the ingenuity of the trade routes as the spices themselves. You can picture a textile merchant marveling at a bolt of cloth, its color so intense it seemed to glow, all thanks to some plants harvested thousands of miles away. It shows how the Silk Road was a holistic network, moving not just flavors and medicines, but also beauty and artistry. These smaller, often forgotten, exchanges cemented the foundation of global trade. They fostered the development of sophisticated navigational techniques, improved road systems, and led to the growth of cities as vital trading hubs. Each dusty caravan, each creaking ship, carried not just goods but stories, beliefs, and innovations from one end of the known world to the other. And it was this intricate dance of demand and supply for everything from shimmering silk to a handful of pungent resin that truly laid the groundwork for the more famous spice empires to come. With the stage set by cinnamon and the myriad of other hidden gems trickling along the early trade routes, our spotlight now shifts to a spice that, for centuries, held a truly astonishing power: pepper. Not the colorful medley you see in a grinder today, but the humble, yet fiercely desired, black peppercorn. You probably sprinkle it on your eggs without a second thought, but in ancient times, The pursuit of pepper was relentless, often violent, and incredibly profitable. This wasn't just a seasoning. It was a form of currency, a dowry, even a ransom. Imagine paying your taxes in peppercorns instead of cash. Sounds like a scene from a sitcom, right? But for vast stretches of history, that was a very real possibility. The Romans, those great empire builders and conquerors, had an insatiable appetite for black pepper. They weren't just fond of its sharp bite. They considered it a luxury, a symbol of their vast wealth and refined taste. Their culinary texts, like Apicius's De Re Culinaria, are absolutely brimming with recipes that call for copious amounts of pepper. They spiced everything from roasted meats to rich sauces, even some desserts. This wasn't a subtle background note. It was front and center, a declaration of status on every plate. The demand was so high that vast quantities of pepper flowed from its native Malabar coast in southwestern India, across the Arabian Sea, and through the bustling markets of Alexandria, eventually reaching every corner of the Roman Empire. This mainstream historical fact underscores just how deeply ingrained pepper became in Western cuisine and economy. But here's a quirky tidbit that truly highlights pepper's value. When Alaric the Visigoth besieged Rome in 410 AD, one of his demands for lifting the siege wasn't just gold and silver. Among the thousands of pounds of precious metals, he also demanded 3,000 pounds of pepper. Think about that for a moment. This barbarian king, poised to sack the greatest city in the Western world, valued pepper so highly that he put it on par with literal tons of gold. It wasn't just a spice. It was a strategic asset, a concentrated form of wealth that could be easily transported and exchanged. You can almost picture Alaric stroking his beard. All right, Rome, give us your gold, your silver. And don't forget the spicy stuff. We're planning a big barbecue after this. It sounds like a punchline, but it was deadly serious. This demand for pepper fueled incredible expeditions and bitter rivalries. Controlling the sources and the trade routes meant unimaginable riches. Arab merchants, just like with cinnamon, initially held a tight monopoly, keeping the origins a closely guarded secret and exaggerating the dangers of acquiring it. They spread tales of fierce dragons guarding pepper vines and poisonous snakes lurking in the plantations. Anything to keep the European powers from finding the source and cutting them out of the lucrative trade. This secrecy built immense fortunes and allowed them to dictate prices, maintaining the pepper's status as a precious commodity. The pursuit of pepper didn't just enrich traders. It spurred innovation in navigation and shipbuilding. European powers, desperate to bypass the Arab middlemen and the Venetian merchants who controlled the distribution in Europe, began to finance daring voyages of exploration. This was the driving force behind much of the Age of Discovery. Vasco da Gama's perilous journey around the Cape of Good Hope to Calicut, India, in 1498 wasn't motivated by a desire for exotic landscapes. It was driven by the priceless pursuit of pepper. When he returned with ships laden with the spice, it wasn't just a successful trade mission. It was a geopolitical earthquake, signaling the shift of power from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic and opening up direct sea routes to the east. Historians still argue whether the astronomical prices of pepper in Europe during the Middle Ages were solely due to genuine scarcity and high demand, or if it was also a clever manipulation of the market by dominant trading powers like Venice. Was it pure economics, or was there a significant element of price gouging involved? Regardless, the impact was undeniable. Pepper's influence stretched far beyond the dinner table, igniting fierce competition among nascent European empires and reshaping global economics. It transformed from a simple berry into a geopolitical linchpin, a small, unassuming sphere that could topple kingdoms and launch entire fleets. You can almost hear the whispered conversations in royal courts, not about crowns or alliances, but about controlling the supply of this tiny, fiery little fruit. While pepper was busy launching maritime empires, another spice, equally potent in its historical impact, was stirring up an altogether darker chapter: nutmeg. Today, you might grate a little over your eggnog during the holidays or sprinkle some into a bechamel sauce. But for centuries, this unassuming seed and its lacy aril, mace, were the ultimate symbols of colonial ambition, greed, and ultimately, shocking brutality. The pursuit of nutmeg sparked bloody conflicts. led to acts of unimaginable cruelty, and even resulted in the trade of an entire island. This isn't just about a flavor. It's about the very real, very human cost of controlling a precious commodity. Imagine stepping onto a remote, volcanic island, lush with tropical foliage, the air thick with the sweet, intoxicating scent of nutmeg. This was the Bandas, a tiny cluster of islands in what is now Indonesia, the sole source of nutmeg for the entire world. For centuries, these islands were a sacred secret, their location known only to a select few Arab and then Venetian traders who carefully controlled the supply. This exclusivity created an astronomical demand in Europe, making nutmeg even more valuable than pepper at various points in history. It wasn't just for cooking. It was believed to be a potent cure for the plague, a miracle drug that could ward off the Black Death. You can almost hear the frantic whispers in plague-ridden European cities. Get the nutmeg. It's our only hope. This belief, though entirely unfounded, inflated its price to absurd levels, making it a golden ticket for anyone who could get their hands on it. This mainstream historical fact, the Bandas being the exclusive source, is crucial to understanding the ensuing violence. When the Portuguese first discovered the Bandas in the early 16th century, they tried to control the trade, but they lacked the military might to enforce a complete monopoly. The Bandanese people, resourceful and fiercely independent, often sold their nutmeg to anyone who arrived, whether Portuguese or local traders, irritating the Europeans who expected exclusive rights. It was the Dutch, however, who took the pursuit of monopoly to an unprecedented, horrifying extreme. Here's a quirky tidbit that reveals the depth of their obsession. The Dutch East India Company, or VOC, was not just a trading company. It was a ruthless, state-backed superpower with its own army and navy. Their goal was absolute control, meaning literally every single nutmeg tree on Earth. In 1621, under the command of Jan Pieter Soen Cohen, they launched a brutal campaign of extermination against the Bandanese population. Cohen's forces systematically massacred or enslaved nearly the entire indigenous population of the islands, an estimated 15,000 people, to secure their nutmeg monopoly. Imagine the sheer, chilling determination required to wipe out an entire civilization just to control a spice. It's a level of corporate ruthlessness that, even today, makes you raise an eyebrow. Just a bit of genocide for our spices, good chaps. It's a dark stain on the history of global trade. The Dutch then repopulate the islands with slaves and indentured servants, forcing them to cultivate nutmeg under strict supervision, ensuring that no tree, no seed, no single hint of the spice left the Bandas without their explicit permission. They would even lime the nutmegs before shipment, effectively destroying their germination capability to prevent anyone from growing them elsewhere. This extreme measure was a testament to their desire for a permanent, impenetrable monopoly. And here's another astonishing aspect of this bloody history: the trade of Manhattan Island. Yes, the very island upon which New York City now stands. In 1667, after decades of Anglo-Dutch wars, the Treaty of Breda was signed. In a bizarre exchange, the Dutch, having conquered the English colony of New Netherland, which included Manhattan, traded it back to the English in exchange for the tiny island of Run, one of the Banda Islands. Why Run? Because it was the last holdout, an island where the English had managed to establish a small foothold and were growing nutmeg, threatening the Dutch monopoly. So, in essence, a bustling future metropolis was swapped for a small, distant island covered in nutmeg trees. Historians still argue whether this exchange was a strategic blunder for the Dutch in the long term, or if, at the time, control over the nutmeg trade was genuinely considered the more valuable asset. Was it foresight or folly? The story of nutmeg isn't just about its unique flavor or its perceived medicinal properties. It's a stark reminder of the immense power of commodities, the lengths to which humans will go for wealth and control, and the devastating impact of unchecked colonial ambition. The sweet scent of nutmeg, for so long, carried with it the bitter tang of blood and tyranny. If nutmeg's story was one of bloody monopolies, then cloves offer a parallel, equally dramatic tale of colonial ambition and fierce control. You've seen them, those tiny, nail-shaped buds, adding a pungent warmth to mulled wine or a holiday ham. But for centuries, cloves were far more than a festive spice. They were a strategic resource that fueled empires and ignited a desperate race for global dominance. They didn't just season food, they seasoned the very course of history. Like nutmeg, cloves originated from a very specific, limited geographical area, the Moluccas or Spice Islands, particularly the islands of Ternate and Tidore in what is now Indonesia. This mainstream historical fact meant that controlling these tiny volcanic specks was tantamount to controlling the world's supply of this highly prized commodity. For millennia, indigenous traders and then Arab merchants meticulously guarded the secret of their source, ensuring their immense profits. The demand in Europe was insatiable, driven not just by culinary desires, but also by medicinal beliefs. Cloves were thought to be a powerful painkiller, an aphrodisiac, and even a breath freshener. Imagine the medieval equivalent of chewing gum, but with a kick that could numb your tongue. When the Portuguese arrived in the early 16th century, they, like with other spices, attempted to establish dominance. They built fortresses, waged wars against local rulers, and tried to corner the market. But their control was always tenuous, challenged by the native populations and eventually by other European powers. The true masters of the clove monopoly would emerge from the Dutch East India Company, the same ruthless entity that ravaged the Bondas for nutmeg. Here's a quirky tidbit about the Dutch pursuit of cloves. The Dutch perfected a strategy of eradication. To maintain their iron grip on the supply and keep prices artificially high, they systematically destroyed clove trees on any island not under their direct, absolute control. They would send expeditions to other Moluccan islands, burning fields and chopping down trees, ensuring that the only cloves available came from their plantations. Imagine the sheer audacity, destroying vast natural resources to protect your bottom line. It's the ultimate example of scarcity economics, taken to an environmental extreme. You can almost hear a Dutch captain barking orders. Burn it all. Every single clove tree outside our domain. We'll show those pesky free growers. It's a level of control that feels almost cartoonishly villainous now, but it was deadly serious then. This ruthless strategy wasn't just about economic power. It was about preventing rivals, particularly the English, from gaining a foothold in the lucrative spice trade. The Anglo-Dutch rivalry in the East Indies was a continuous, brutal struggle, marked by skirmishes, sabotage, and grand-scale corporate espionage. The Dutch understood that whoever controlled the source of cloves and nutmeg controlled a significant portion of global wealth. This led to a period of intense colonization and exploitation, as European powers carved up vast swathes of the world, all for the sake of these small, dried flower buds. The impact of cloves extended beyond trade wars. The forced labor and exploitation of indigenous populations to work the clove plantations led to immense suffering and demographic collapse in many areas. The wealth generated from spices like cloves flowed back to Europe, funding further colonial expansion, wars, and the rise of powerful merchant classes. It helped transform port cities like Amsterdam into financial powerhouses, built on the backs of distant tropical lands. Historians still argue whether the Dutch approach to monopolizing spices, particularly cloves and nutmeg, was an inevitable outcome of early capitalism or a uniquely brutal manifestation of corporate power. Was it simply the way business was done at the time, or did the VOC push the boundaries of cruelty beyond what was considered acceptable even in that era? Regardless of the answer, cloves, seemingly innocuous, played a pivotal role in the European scramble for global dominance, acting as a small, aromatic key to unlocking vast fortunes and reshaping the geopolitical landscape. Their story is a stark reminder that even the smallest commodity can carry the heaviest historical weight. From the brutal monopolies of nutmeg and cloves, we now turn our gaze to a spice that, despite its delicate appearance, commanded an even higher price and held an equally esteemed position: saffron. If you've ever bought it, you know it's not cheap. Those tiny, crimson threads, hand-picked from the stigma of a crocus flower, are the very definition of precious. You use it sparingly, carefully, perhaps in a paella or a delicate dessert. But for thousands of years, saffron was more than just a culinary delight. It was a potent medicine, a vibrant dye, and a symbol of ultimate luxury and status. Imagine an ancient field bathed in the soft glow of dawn, thousands of purple crocus flowers unfurling their petals. Farmers, often women and children, meticulously pluck the three tiny red threads from each blossom, one by one. This labor-intensive process is a mainstream historical fact that explains saffron's exorbitant price, then as now. It takes approximately 150 flowers to yield just 1 gram of dried saffron, and over 75,000 flowers to produce a single pound. This isn't a spice you harvest with a combine. It's a spice harvested with immense patience and care. The sheer effort involved in collecting enough of these delicate threads made it a luxury item reserved for the elite. Saffron's journey began in the Mediterranean and parts of Asia, with its cultivation tracing back over 3,500 years to ancient Greece and Crete. The Minoans, a sophisticated Bronze Age civilization, depicted saffron harvesting in their frescoes, underscoring its cultural and economic importance even then. They didn't just sprinkle it on their food. They used it as a perfume, a dye for royal robes, and a vital component in their medicinal concoctions. It was believed to cure melancholy, ease childbirth, and even act as an aphrodisiac. You can almost picture an ancient Greek physician prescribing a spoonful of saffron-infused wine to someone feeling a bit down, perhaps muttering, "Just a little sunshine in a cup, my friend." Here's a quirky tidbit about saffron's past. During the Middle Ages in Europe, saffron was so valuable that it became a target for theft and counterfeiting. In Nuremberg, Germany, in the 14th century, there was even a specific saffron law that prescribed severe penalties for adulterating the spice. People caught diluting saffron with cheaper alternatives like calendula petals could face fines, imprisonment, or even execution. Imagine being led to the gallows for adding a few marigold petals to your saffron. Your Honor, I merely wish to stretch the supply. It sounds absurd, but it highlights just how high the stakes were for controlling this valuable commodity. This wasn't just about consumer fraud. It was about protecting a major economic artery. Saffron's golden hue also gave it immense symbolic power. In many cultures, its vibrant color represented divinity, purity, and royalty. Buddhist monks, for instance, have traditionally worn robes dyed with saffron, symbolizing their detachment from worldly possessions and their spiritual path. The color wasn't just aesthetically pleasing, it carried deep spiritual significance. This dual role as both a practical dye and a sacred pigment demonstrates saffron's multifaceted importance across diverse civilizations. The trade in saffron was as intricate as its cultivation. From its origins, it spread across the Silk Road to China, down to India, and across the Roman Empire. The Arabs introduced its cultivation to Spain, where saffron, or azafrán, became deeply embedded in Spanish cuisine and culture, most famously in paella. This expansion wasn't always smooth. Control over saffron-producing regions often led to minor skirmishes and fierce commercial rivalries. Historians still argue whether the primary economic value of saffron historically lay more in its use as a dye for textiles and religious ceremonies, or in its perceived medicinal benefits and culinary applications. Was it more about making beautiful cloths and ritualistic offerings, or about healing the sick and flavoring the food of the wealthy? The truth is likely a blend of all these factors, each contributing to its unparalleled status as the world's most expensive spice, a title it largely retains even today. Its fragile threads continue to tell a story of human labor, desire, and the enduring power of luxury. From the fiery cost of saffron, we now turn to a spice that, for many, might be nothing more than a faint echo in a forgotten recipe, galangal. You might have encountered it in Thai or Indonesian cuisine, its knobby root resembling ginger but with a distinctly sharper, more citrusy, almost piney aroma. Yet, this wasn't always a niche ingredient. For centuries, galangal was a major player on the spice routes, a powerful medicine, and a staple in kitchens from the Middle East to medieval Europe. It was, in many ways, the forgotten ginger, often overshadowed by its more famous relative, but with a unique history all its own. Imagine a medieval apothecary, bustling with the scent of dried herbs and exotic resins. Among them, you'd find dried pieces of galangal root, highly prized for its medicinal properties. This is a mainstream historical fact, galangal was widely used in European herbal medicine throughout the Middle Ages. It was believed to be a potent remedy for indigestion, a stimulant, and even a cure for bad breath. People would chew on small pieces of it after meals to aid digestion and freshen their mouths. So, before mints and mouthwash, there was galangal, silently working its magic. You can almost see a weary traveler, having just consumed a heavy meal at a roadside inn, reaching for a chunk of galangal from his satchel, hoping to avoid that uncomfortable post-dinner bloat. Galangal actually refers to several species within the Alpinia and Chimpheria genera, but the most commonly traded varieties were greater galangal, Alpinia gallana, and lesser galangal, Alpinia officinare. Native to Southeast Asia, these roots traveled vast distances, much like other spices, making their way into Arab pharmacology and then into European markets. Its taste, while somewhat similar to ginger, has a more camphoraceous, peppery, and slightly floral note, making it distinct enough to be sought out for its own unique flavor profile. Here's a quirky tidbit about galangal's culinary journey. While it's now primarily associated with Southeast Asian dishes like tom yum soup, in medieval Europe, it was a popular ingredient in both savory and sweet dishes. It appeared in everything from meat stews and pottages to spiced wines and gingerbread. The Europeans of the Middle Ages were far more adventurous with their spice cabinet than we often give them credit for, blending exotic flavors in ways that might seem surprising to modern palates. Imagine a medieval Christmas feast, and among the roasted boar and honeyed cakes, you'd find dishes subtly, or perhaps not so subtly, infused with the zesty, peppery kick of galangal. More galangal, good sirrah, my humors demand it. It's a delightful image of culinary cross-pollination. The trade routes that brought galangal to Europe were often the same ones used for more famous spices. Arab merchants played a crucial role in its dissemination, carrying it from Southeast Asia to the Middle East, from where it then found its way into the hands of Venetian and Genoese traders who distributed it across the continent. It wasn't always as valuable as pepper or saffron, but its consistent demand made it a reliable commodity, a steady source of income for those who traded it. As European palates shifted and New World ingredients like chili peppers became more prevalent, the use of galangal in Western cuisine gradually declined. It faded from popular cookbooks and apothecary shelves, largely replaced by ginger, which had a more accessible flavor profile and was perhaps easier to cultivate or import in larger quantities. Its decline is a fascinating example of how culinary tastes evolve and how spices can rise and fall in popularity over centuries. Historians still argue whether the decline of galangal's popularity in Europe was primarily due to changing tastes and the introduction of new spices, or if disruptions in its supply chain, perhaps due to political instability along the trade routes, played a more significant role. Was it a preference shift or a logistical challenge? Whatever the reason, galangal serves as a poignant reminder of the ebb and flow of culinary trends and the many forgotten flavors that once shaped global cuisines. As galangal faded into the background of European spice cabinets, another category of aromatic plants, often shrouded in historical ambiguity, continued to play a significant role on the spice routes. Various species of amomum. You might not recognize the name, but these were once vital ingredients, especially in traditional Asian medicine and cuisine, and often confused with cardamom or ginger. Their story is one of elusive aromas, scientific debate, and a quiet, persistent influence that stretches back millennia. Imagine ancient spice markets, bustling with merchants, and among the piles of familiar spices, you spot dried pods or rhizomes, distinct yet subtly similar to other well-known aromatics. These were likely various amomum species. This mainstream historical fact is that many plants from the amomum genus, related to ginger and cardamom, were widely used across Asia, particularly in China and Southeast Asia, for their medicinal properties and distinctive flavors. They were often referred to by regional names like black cardamom or Java cardamom, contributing to the confusion about their exact identity in historical texts. They were believed to aid digestion, treat nausea, and warm the body, essentially the ancient equivalent of a soothing herbal tea for an upset stomach. You can almost see a weary traveler reaching for a pouch of dried amomum pods after a long, bumpy journey, hoping to settle their uneasy stomach. The challenge with omomum is its sheer diversity and the difficulty of precise identification in historical records. Many different species, each with slightly varied chemical compositions and aromatic profiles, were traded under similar names. Some, like Omomum subulatum, often called black cardamom, have a strong, smoky, camphor-like flavor, essential to many Indian curries and Chinese braised dishes. Others were more delicate, perhaps used in lighter broths or even perfumes. This makes tracing their individual journeys and impacts a fascinating, yet frustrating, historical puzzle. Here's a quirky tidbit. In ancient Chinese medicine, omomum species were highly valued for their qi-regulating properties, believed to move stagnant energy and promote overall well-being. They weren't just about physical ailments. They were deeply integrated into a holistic understanding of health and vitality. Imagine an ancient Chinese physician carefully selecting particular omomum pods, not just for their taste, but for their energetic qualities, believing they could rebalance your internal harmony. Your qi is blocked, my friend. A little omomum will set you right, like a traffic cop for your inner energy. It's a testament to the deep, nuanced understanding of plant properties in traditional medicine. The trade in omomum species wasn't as globally impactful as that of pepper or nutmeg, but it was incredibly significant within Asian trade networks. From the jungles of Southeast Asia, these spices traveled along inland river routes and coastal maritime paths, reaching major trading hubs in China, India, and beyond. They were a consistent presence in local economies, providing livelihood for collectors and merchants, and enriching the culinary and medicinal traditions of vast populations. As European powers began to dominate global trade routes, many of these lesser spices, whose primary markets were intra-Asian, received less attention in Western historical accounts. They didn't fuel colonial wars or massive mercantile fleets in the same way. This contributed to their subsequent forgotten status in a Eurocentric historical narrative, even though they remained, and continue to be, incredibly important in the regions where they are native. Historians still argue whether the historical confusion surrounding different omomum species significantly impacted their global trade and value, or if their regional importance simply overshadowed any need for precise botanical classification in a pre-scientific era. Did the lack of clear naming hinder their wider adoption, or was it simply irrelevant for those who knew and used them intimately? The truth is, these unsung aromatics continue to infuse the cuisines and medicines of billions, their elusive aromas a quiet testament to their enduring legacy. As some spices faded into obscurity and others maintained their regional importance, there's one particular fiery berry that once reigned supreme in Roman kitchens before being largely eclipsed: long pepper. You might have never seen it, let alone tasted it. It looks like a slender, dark catkin, not a collection of individual peppercorns, but its historical significance is undeniable. For centuries, it was the preferred pungent spice of the ancient world, predating black pepper's widespread popularity and offering a distinctly different, yet equally compelling, heat. Imagine a Roman feast, tables laden with roasted meats, rich sauces, and exotic fruits. While you might expect black pepper, a mainstream historical fact is that long pepper, Piper longum, was the original and often preferred spice for heat and flavor in Roman and Greek cuisine. Writers like Pliny the Elder and Hippocrates mention it frequently, valuing it not just for its taste, but also for its perceived medicinal properties, including its use as a remedy for insomnia and digestive issues. Its flavor is more complex than black pepper, a mix of hot, sweet, and musky, with hints of ginger and nutmeg. You can almost picture a Roman chef meticulously grinding these slender spikes, admiring the intricate flavor profile they imparted to a dish, something beyond the simple piquancy of what we now call pepper. Long pepper originates from India, just like black pepper, and it traveled along similar land and sea routes to reach the Mediterranean. For a long time, it was the dominant pepper in Europe, commanding high prices and being a staple of ancient and medieval spice trade. Its unique form, like a miniature pine cone, made it easily distinguishable and highly prized. Here's a quirky tidbit about long pepper's surprising decline. Despite its initial popularity, long pepper gradually fell out of favor in Europe, largely supplanted by black pepper after the Age of Discovery. This wasn't necessarily because black pepper was superior in flavor or medicinal value, but rather due to a combination of factors, including black pepper becoming more readily available and cheaper through direct sea routes established by the Portuguese and Dutch. Suddenly, a spice that required a complex, multi-stage overland journey from India became less attractive than one that could be shipped directly. It's almost as if long pepper was the artisanal, boutique spice, and black pepper became the mass-produced, supermarket variety. Sorry, long pepper, your journey's just too complicated now that we've found the express lane. The shift wasn't immediate, but by the 17th century, long pepper's presence in European kitchens had significantly diminished, eventually fading into culinary obscurity in the West. Though it continued to be highly valued in traditional Indian and Southeast Asian cuisines. This dramatic fall from grace for such a historically important spice is a fascinating example of how global trade dynamics can profoundly impact culinary trends. The legacy of long pepper, however, extends beyond just taste. Its prominence in ancient medicinal texts suggests a sophisticated understanding of plant properties. It was considered a powerful carminative, meaning it helped relieve flatulence, and a stimulant for the digestive system. Physicians believed it could warm the body and clear blockages. This deep integration into both diet and health practices highlights the holistic view of food and medicine that was common in the ancient world. Historians still argue whether long pepper's decline was purely an economic consequence of black pepper's cheaper availability, or if there was a subtle shift in European culinary preferences towards the sharper, more straightforward heat of black pepper. Did people genuinely prefer the taste of the newcomer, or was it simply a matter of cost and convenience? Regardless, the story of long pepper serves as a compelling reminder that even culinary titans can be dethroned by the relentless forces of commerce and changing tastes, leaving a once-celebrated flavor to quietly fade into the footnotes of history. From the rise and fall of long pepper, our spice journey now takes us to a fascinating, yet fleeting, star of the medieval European palate, grains of paradise. You've probably never tasted them, and perhaps never even heard the name. But these small, reddish-brown seeds, with their peppery, citrusy, and slightly floral notes, were once highly fashionable. A prized possession on the tables of royalty and the wealthy throughout Europe. Their story is a brief, but brilliant, moment in the sun before they too faded into obscurity. Imagine a bustling medieval market in London or Paris. Amidst the clamor, a merchant proudly displays a small bag of these exotic seeds. This is a mainstream historical fact. Grains of paradise, Aframoma meligata, also known as meligata pepper, were a popular and highly valued spice in Europe from the 14th to the 16th centuries. They were brought from West Africa, primarily from regions now known as Ghana and Liberia, across the Sahara Desert by trans-Saharan trade routes, and then by sea to European ports. Their flavor, often described as a complex blend of black pepper, cardamom, and ginger with hints of citrus, made them a versatile ingredient in everything from spiced wines and beers to savory dishes and confections. You can almost see a medieval cook carefully sprinkling these precious grains into a pot, confident that they would impress their lord with an exotic, multifaceted flavor. The name itself, Grains of Paradise, hints at the mystery and allure surrounding this spice. Just like with cinnamon and pepper, early traders often created mythical origins to inflate their value and protect their sources. The name suggested a connection to a distant, idyllic, and almost magical place, making the spice even more desirable. Here's a quirky tidbit. Grains of paradise were particularly popular in England, especially during the Tudor period. They were widely used in the brewing of ale and beer, giving it a distinctive spicy kick. Imagine a hearty medieval ale, not just malty, but infused with a complex warmth and subtle citrus notes from these mysterious grains. Another pint, good barkeep, and make sure it's got that paradisiacal zing. It's a fun thought, isn't it, that your ancestors might have enjoyed a beer flavored with a spice you've never even encountered? Their use in brewing was so prevalent that it even earned them the nickname Guinea grains, due to their origin on the West African coast, near the Guinea region. The decline of grains of paradise in Europe is a classic tale of changing trade dynamics. As the direct sea routes to Asia were established by the Portuguese and later the Dutch, black pepper and other Asian spices became more readily available and significantly cheaper. The trans-Saharan trade routes, which were vital for bringing grains of paradise to Europe, became less economically viable for this particular spice. Why bother with the arduous overland journey when ships could bring vast quantities of Asian pepper directly to your doorstep for less? This shift in trade routes meant that grains of paradise, despite their unique flavor, simply couldn't compete on price or availability with the flood of Asian spices. They gradually faded from European cookbooks and market stalls, becoming a culinary curiosity rather than a staple. While they remained important in their native West Africa and found some continued use in traditional medicine and regional cuisines there, their moment in the European sun was brief but memorable. Historians still argue whether the decline of grains of paradise in Europe was solely a matter of economic competition from cheaper Asian spices, or if there was also a genuine shift in culinary preferences as palates became accustomed to the stronger, simpler heat of black pepper. Did people simply grow tired of their complex flavor, or were they just outcompeted on price? Regardless, the journey of grains of paradise reminds us that the spice trade was a constantly shifting landscape, where even beloved flavors could be supplanted by the relentless forces of global commerce. Just as grains of paradise experienced a swift ascent and descent in popularity, another curious spice, a close cousin to long pepper, also had its moment in the European sun before largely disappearing from Western tables: cubeb pepper. You might stumble upon it in a specialty spice shop today. Its small, wrinkled berries sporting a tiny stem or tail, but for centuries, it was a common and valued alternative to black pepper, appreciated for its slightly more camphoraceous, piney, and less pungent heat. Imagine a bustling medieval port, ships unloading their precious cargo from the east. Among the sacks of black pepper, you'd find distinctively tailed berries. These are cubebs. This is a mainstream historical fact. Cubeb pepper, Piper cubeba, originated in Indonesia, particularly on the island of Java, and was a significant item in the spice trade from ancient times through the Middle Ages. Arab traders were instrumental in bringing it to Europe, where it was widely used as a culinary spice and a medicinal ingredient. It was prized for its ability to add a subtle, aromatic warmth to dishes, often in conjunction with, or as a cheaper alternative to, black pepper. You can almost envision a medieval cook, perhaps a bit short on the more expensive black pepper, opting for cubebs, knowing their distinct flavor would still elevate the dish. A dash of cubeb, then, for a touch of that exotic warmth. Cubebs were highly valued in Arabic and Ayurvedic medicine, believed to be beneficial for a variety of ailments, including respiratory issues, urinary tract infections, and digestive problems. Its antiseptic and anti-inflammatory properties were recognized long before modern science confirmed them. This dual role as both a flavorful spice and a powerful medicine made it a consistently sought-after commodity. Here's a quirky tidbit about its decline. The fall of cubeb pepper from grace in Europe is often attributed to a deliberate act of suppression by the Portuguese. Once they gained control over the spice trade routes from Southeast Asia, they allegedly restricted the import of cubebs into Europe. Why? To protect the market for black pepper, which they could control more easily, and which was arguably more profitable for them. Imagine a corporate conspiracy unfolding centuries ago, a spice empire deciding to simply cancel a competitor. No more cubebs, they'd decree. Only our preferred brand of black pepper will do. It sounds almost comically villainous, but such was the cutthroat nature of the early global spice trade. Whether this suppression was fully effective or simply coincided with a natural shift in preferences is a matter of historical debate. But the fact remains that by the 17th century, cubeb pepper had largely vanished from European culinary use. It became a spice of historical curiosity in the West, though it continued to thrive in its native regions and in various traditional medicines. The story of cubeb pepper is a stark reminder of how imperial ambitions and economic strategies could reshape culinary landscapes. It wasn't necessarily that black pepper was inherently better or more flavorful. It was that the forces of supply and demand, influenced by powerful monopolies, dictated which spices would flourish and which would fade. It shows how even a widely accepted ingredient could be pushed out by geopolitical maneuvering. Historians still argue whether the decline of cubeb pepper was primarily due to the Portuguese suppression, or if changing European palates simply preferred the more direct heat of black pepper as it became more abundant. Was it an economic hit or a culinary miss? Regardless, the little-tailed berry serves as a quiet testament to the complex interplay of trade, power, and taste that shaped the spice routes and, by extension, the world's kitchens. As some spices like cubeb pepper experienced their orchestrated decline, others, intimately linked yet distinctly different, held their ground. Our focus now turns to mace, a spice that is quite literally the close relative of nutmeg, but with its own unique flavor profile and historical journey. You might have seen it sold as delicate, lacy blades, often orange or reddish, or perhaps as a finely ground powder. It's subtly different from nutmeg, milder and more aromatic, proving that sometimes the understudy can shine in its own right. Imagine holding a nutmeg fruit in your hand, its outer husk peeled away. Beneath it, you find the hard, dark seed, that's nutmeg. But wrapped around that seed, like a delicate, fiery red spiderweb, is the aril, and that is mace. This is a mainstream historical fact. Mace is the outer covering of the nutmeg seed, myristica fragrans, and while they come from the same fruit, they offer distinct flavors. Mace is generally considered more delicate, pungent, and subtly sweet than nutmeg, with hints of pepper and pine. It's often preferred in lighter dishes where nutmeg might be too dominant, or in baked goods where its nuanced aroma can truly shine. You can almost picture a discerning chef from centuries past, carefully separating the mace from the nutmeg, understanding that each offered a unique contribution to their culinary creations. Like nutmeg, mace originated solely from the Banda Islands, which made it equally valuable and subject to the same ruthless monopolization by the Dutch East India Company. Any attempt to smuggle or cultivate nutmeg or mace elsewhere was met with severe penalties. The Dutch understood that two distinct spices from the same source meant double the profit and double the control. Here's a quirky tidbit about mace's distinct use. While nutmeg found its way into savory dishes and a lot of the plague cures, mace was particularly favored in historical European confectionery, preserves, and pickling. Its lighter, brighter aroma made it ideal for fruit tarts, spiced custards, and various preserved fruits, where it added warmth without overwhelming the delicate flavors. Imagine a medieval dessert, perhaps a quince preserve or an apple tart, subtly infused with the fragrant, almost citrusy notes of mace. Just a whisper of mace, my dear, to elevate this trifle to heavenly heights. It speaks to a more refined, perhaps even playful, application of a spice that shared a common, often brutal, origin story with its bolder twin. The trade routes for mace were, of course, identical to those for nutmeg. It traveled from the Bandas to various trading hubs, eventually making its way to Europe via Arab and Venetian merchants, and later directly by European powers. Its high price and limited availability made it a luxury item, a testament to the immense distances and dangers involved in its procurement. Even though they shared a common source and destiny in terms of colonial control, the historical narratives often treat nutmeg as the primary commodity, with mace as a valuable but secondary product. This might be due to nutmeg's broader culinary and medicinal applications, or simply its more robust flavor profile, which made it a more dominant presence. However, mace held its own distinct culinary niche, demonstrating that even within the same plant, different parts could command different values and inspire different uses. Historians still argue whether mace's slightly milder flavor profile contributed to its enduring, albeit niche, popularity compared to nutmeg, or if its fate was entirely intertwined with that of its more famous counterpart due to their shared origin. Was it truly a matter of taste, or simply a byproduct of the nutmeg trade? Regardless, mace stands as a testament to the fact that even the most obscure parts of a plant can hold immense historical and culinary significance, reminding us of the intricate tapestry woven by the spice routes. Having explored the delicate nuances of mace and its famous twin, we now brace ourselves for a spice whose ancient importance completely belies its modern, often maligned reputation, asafoetida. You might know it, if at all, as that intensely pungent, almost sulfuric, powder often found in Indian cooking. Its aroma, when raw, is memorable, to say the least, often described as smelling like garlic, onions, or even something far less appealing. Yet, for thousands of years, this potent resin was considered a powerhouse of medicine and a crucial flavor enhancer across vast regions of the world. Imagine ancient Roman banquets or elaborate Persian feasts. Among the refined dishes, you'd find traces of asafoetida. This is a mainstream historical fact. Asafoetida, Ferula asafoetida, a resin tapped from the roots of a giant fennel-like plant native to Afghanistan and Iran, was highly valued in ancient Rome, Persia, and particularly in India. The Romans, in fact, used it so extensively that they sometimes referred to it as food of the gods, or silphium when referring to a related, now extinct, plant. It was an essential ingredient for flavor, particularly in dishes where garlic and onions were not available or desired. Its unique umami, pungent, and savory notes, when cooked, transform into something surprisingly pleasant, mellowing significantly from its raw intensity. You can almost picture a Roman chef carefully adding a tiny pinch of this potent powder to a sauce, knowing it would add a depth of flavor that nothing else could replicate. Just a touch, mind you, or the entire villa will smell like a dragon's breath. Its intense aroma when raw is often compared to rotting onions or even something far more foul, leading to its common nickname, devil's dung. This isn't exactly a marketing slogan that screams delicious. But here's a quirky tidbit. Despite its notorious smell, asafoetida was incredibly popular in ancient Rome as a substitute for silphium, a highly prized and now extinct herb from Cyrene, whose flavor was said to be exquisite and which was used as both a condiment and a medicine. When silphium became extinct due to overharvesting, asafoetida stepped in as its closest aromatic stand-in, maintaining its culinary and medicinal legacy. It's like a band's notoriously smelly roadie becoming a respected session musician after the star singer retires. This substitution speaks volumes about its effectiveness in imparting a unique flavor profile that was evidently deeply missed. Beyond its culinary uses, asafoetida was a giant in ancient medicine. It was believed to aid digestion, alleviate flatulence, treat bronchitis, and even ward off evil spirits. In some cultures, people would wear small bags of asafoetida around their necks as a talisman against disease, particularly during epidemics. Imagine walking around with a tiny, pungent sachet, hoping its aroma would protect you from illness. It sounds like a joke, but for people facing deadly diseases with limited medical knowledge, every little bit of perceived protection helped. The trade in asafoetida primarily followed overland routes from Central Asia into the Middle East, and then extensively into India, where it became, and remains, an indispensable ingredient in many regional cuisines, especially in vegetarian dishes in the Jain and Vaishnava traditions where onions and garlic are avoided. Its ability to mimic their savory depth makes it a vital replacement. Its decline in European use after the Roman era is a bit of a mystery, possibly due to changing palates or the increasing availability of garlic and onions from closer sources. It simply stopped being a necessity, replaced by more readily available and less offensively aromatic alternatives. However, its continued prominence in Indian cuisine ensures its ancient legacy lives on, a testament to its enduring power when handled with care. Historians still argue whether asafoetida's strong raw odor was a significant barrier to its wider and more consistent adoption in Western cuisines over time, or if its decline was simply a result of evolving culinary trends and the rise of other aromatics. Did its bad press hinder its true potential, or was it simply outshone? Regardless, asafoetida reminds us that beauty, and indeed flavor, can truly be in the nose of the beholder, and that even the most pungent spices have a fascinating, deeply rooted past. We've journeyed through the tantalizing tales of cinnamon, the fierce pursuit of pepper, the bloody history of nutmeg, and the pungent past of asafoetida. Now, as we approach the end of our historical spice expedition, it's time to reflect on how these once forgotten, once prized ingredients, along with their more famous counterparts, collectively forged something far grander than mere trade routes. They shaped the very legacy of the spice routes themselves. These pathways weren't just lines on a map. They were arteries of global exchange, fostering connections that continue to influence our world in unexpected ways. Imagine the vast, intricate web stretching across continents and oceans, from the misty shores of the Moluccas to the bustling docks of Venice, from the desert caravans of Central Asia to the ancient markets of Alexandria. This mainstream historical fact is that the spice routes were not a single path, but a complex, interconnected network of land and sea passages that facilitated the movement of goods, people, ideas, and technologies for millennia. They predated the modern concept of globalization by centuries, demonstrating humanity's innate drive for discovery and exchange. Every handful of pepper, every precious thread of saffron, every bag of mysterious almond pods contributed to this grand tapestry of interaction. The impact went far beyond just commerce. The constant flow of traders meant the exchange of religious beliefs, scientific knowledge, architectural styles, and even agricultural practices. New crops and cultivation techniques spread, enriching diverse regions. For example, the knowledge of irrigation systems, carried by Arab traders, often accompanied their spice caravans, transforming arid lands into fertile ground. You can almost see a merchant, not just haggling over prices, but casually exchanging tips on growing techniques or sharing a story from a distant land, unknowingly planting the seeds of cultural evolution. Here's a quirky tidbit about an unexpected consequence. The long-distance trade routes also facilitated the spread of diseases like the Black Death, which tragically swept across Europe in the 14th century. While devastating, it's a stark reminder of the unintended interconnectedness that the spice routes fostered. Imagine a weary sailor, unknowingly carrying a tiny flea on his clothing, a flea that carried the very plague that would decimate populations thousands of miles away. Just bringing some lovely silks and, oh yes, a bit of bubonic plague. It's a somber aspect, but one that undeniably shaped demographics and societies. The drive to control these routes and their precious cargo led to monumental shifts in geopolitical power. The rise of empires like Rome, the dominance of Arab caliphates, the flourishing of Italian city-states like Venice, and later, the global expansion of European colonial powers, all were inextricably linked to the quest for spices. The quest for cinnamon, pepper, nutmeg, and cloves literally funded navies, built trading companies, and redrew the map of the world. It transformed tiny islands into strategic battlegrounds and distant continents into coveted prizes. The legacy of the spice routes isn't just about historical facts. It's about the deep imprints left on our modern world. Our globalized economy, diverse culinary traditions, and even the very concept of international trade are direct descendants of these ancient pathways. The demand for a pungent root or an aromatic bark spurred innovations in shipbuilding, navigation, and cartography, propelling humanity towards a more interconnected future. Historians still argue whether the primary legacy of the spice routes lies in their economic impact, creating immense wealth and fueling early capitalism, or in their cultural diffusion, fostering an unparalleled exchange of ideas, technologies, and artistic influences across diverse civilizations. Was it more about money or about minds meeting? Regardless, what began as a search for exotic flavors evolved into a force that fundamentally reshaped human civilization, paving the way for the world you inhabit today. As the echoes of ancient caravans and creaking ships fade, we arrive at the final, quiet contemplation of our journey. How the history of these forgotten spices, and indeed all spices, subtly impacts your kitchen today. You might think the age of spice empires is long gone, safely tucked away in history books. But look around your own culinary space, and you'll discover that the legacies of these ancient aromatic adventures are woven deeply into the very fabric of your daily life, in ways you might not even realize. Imagine opening your spice cabinet. There, among the familiar jars of paprika and cumin, you likely have black pepper, cinnamon, ginger, perhaps even some cloves or nutmeg. These aren't just ingredients. They are living testaments to millennia of human desire, exploration, and trade. The fact that you can buy cinnamon from Sri Lanka or pepper from Vietnam, a mainstream historical fact, is a direct result of those perilous voyages and brutal monopolies we discussed. Your access to these global flavors, once reserved for emperors and the wealthy elite, is a modern miracle, a direct inheritance from the daring and often dark history of the spice routes. You're living the dream of a medieval cook who could only fantasize about such variety. But it goes deeper than just availability. Think about your taste preferences. The balance of sweet and savory in many cuisines, the very concept of spicy food, the comforting aromas of baked goods, all have been shaped by the historical influx of these particular spices. Even if you've never tasted long pepper or cubeb, their rise and fall indirectly influenced the dominance of black pepper in Western cooking, steering culinary evolution in a particular direction. Here's a quirky tidbit. The common phrase, "worth one's salt," actually has ancient roots in the value of commodities. While not directly about spices, it illustrates how vital everyday ingredients were once considered. Similarly, the phrase peppercorn rent, a nominal fee, also harks back to when pepper was so valuable it could literally be used as currency or a form of symbolic payment. It's a subtle linguistic callback that reminds you of how deeply integrated these economic concepts were with the very spices themselves. Imagine negotiating a lease and offering a small bag of turmeric as collateral. It's a genuine Malabar, good sir. Even the way we store spices, in small, airtight containers, is a nod to their historical value, a habit born from centuries when every gram was precious and spoilage meant significant financial loss. You're implicitly honoring those ancient merchants who meticulously protected their cargo. The story of forgotten spices like galangal, almomom, grains of paradise, and asafoetida also highlights the incredible diversity of flavors that once existed and continue to exist in different parts of the world. Their diminished presence in Western kitchens isn't a judgment on their taste, but a reflection of the powerful economic and geopolitical forces that shaped culinary trends. You might think your palate is sophisticated, but there's a whole world of forgotten flavors out there waiting to be rediscovered, if you're brave enough to seek them out. Historians still argue whether modern culinary globalization truly represents a triumph of diversity, making all spices accessible, or if it has ironically led to a homogenization of tastes, prioritizing a few dominant flavors over the vast historical spectrum. Are we truly more adventurous with spices now, or just more reliant on a smaller, commercially viable selection? Regardless, the faint echoes of the spice routes persist in your kitchen, a silent symphony of history waiting to be savored. The sun has set on our historical journey, much like it sets each evening on the distant lands where these spices once sparked empires and adventures. As you lie there now, feeling the gentle rhythm of your breath, picture those ancient paths, those vast oceans, and the countless individuals who risked everything to bring these aromatic treasures from one corner of the world to another. From the fiery kick of pepper to the sweet embrace of cinnamon, from the pungent mysteries of asafoetida to the delicate threads of saffron, each spice carries a tale of human ambition, discovery, and connection. Let those stories linger in your mind, not as dry facts, but as whispers on the wind, carried across centuries to your very doorstep. The world is a richly spiced place, and you are a part of that continuous, unfolding history. Feel the comfort of your bed, the stillness of the night, and let the long, winding journey of the forgotten spices lull you into a peaceful slumber. Their history is now your dream, blending seamlessly into the quiet rhythm of the night. End of script. Sweet dreams.